The Gospel of the Lord. As usual, I'd like to continue with our book study of Matthew Kelly's Rediscover Jesus, just to kind of set the tone with a couple of things that jumped out at me this past week. In chapter 25, he tries to encourage us to read the Gospels, and he uses a pretty powerful metaphor. He says, as children, we are given all sorts of vaccinations to protect us from a variety of diseases. But how does a vaccine work? It contains a little of the disease itself, and by receiving a tiny portion of the disease, your body learns to fight it off. Through this process, you become inoculated. Once you're inoculated, you have become immune to that particular disease. Now, he says a very interesting thing. He says, we have all been inoculated as Christians against the gospel. He says that we have been given a vaccine that contains a small enough dose of Christianity that we have become immune to the gospel. And somewhere along the way, we were given a little bit of Christianity, and now we think we know all about it. And so there's no need for us to read the Gospels anymore. And he says, millions who have rejected Christianity have no idea what they have rejected. Many Christians have been inoculated against Christianity, and they may go to church on Sunday, and in many ways be good members of society. But the inoculation prevents them from truly embracing the Christian faith. And he says it is impossible for us to rediscover Jesus without rediscovering the Gospels. And he invites us to spend 15 minutes a day reading the Gospels. Many times when we read a book, we have the attitude we might just read it once and we'll say, yes, I read Moby Dick, or I read, The Great Gatsby, or I read, some Harry Potter book or The Lord of the Rings. But the Gospels are meant to be read over and over and over again. And so he suggests reading it afresh with a different lens. Perhaps there's something we might be struggling with. And so go there with the theme of patience or compassion, or if our pride gets the best of us, humility. Or if we lack trust in God, then read the Gospels with the lens of trust, how Jesus never let anybody down, that he always gave them what they wanted truly deep down. And so to read the Gospels over and over, starting with Matthew, then go to Mark, then Luke and John, but spend 15 minutes a day, and maybe in a form called Lectio Divina, where we might read just a short passage, but read it slowly, but read it through a particular lens that we need for a certain healing within us. He says that the Gospels are the most comprehensive record of who Jesus was when he walked the earth. And so there's no other place we need to go. There's no other book that synthesizes it. It is the Gospels itself that will lead us to rediscover Jesus. And then in chapter 26 is one of the most important chapters of the book, talks about the prayer process. And shortly we'll be giving you another book for every person 12 years of age and up about specifically how to pray. We've been taught about the importance of praying, but many times as Catholics, we have not been taught how to pray. But in Rediscover Jesus in chapter 26, he gives a prayer process, a starting point and an ending point, and if we do that daily, it will have a radical effect upon our lives. But at the end of the day, he says, we can survive without prayer, but we cannot thrive without prayer. And so those are just some words and food for thought as we set up the gospel today. I remember when I was working here in Raleigh for DOT for 12 years, we had to fill out our time cards every 2 weeks. And when we get our time cards, we just sit there and go 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, meaning that we were there for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, for 10 days in the pay period. And it always struck me that the higher ups, the supervisors would get a better accounting of how many hours we actually worked if we filled out each other's time cards. The person in the cubicle next to you fills out your time card because he knows that, yes, you came to work 10 minutes late every day. You leave at 4:25 and not 4:30. You don't take an hour lunch. You take an hour and 10-minute lunch. Oh, you smoke too, so about 15 minutes a day, 3 times a day, you're not there. So really, you work for 6.5 hours a day. Well, the rest of us, when it comes to ourselves, 8, 8, 8, 8. Well, in the gospel today, we hear of a landowner that goes out and hires people at dawn. And then he goes back out at 9 and 12 and 3 and 5. And he never tells the others how much they're going to get. But the ones at 6 o'clock, he says, I'll give you the usual daily wage. And so at the end of the day, when it comes time to pay them, the ones that worked 1 hour get paid the same as the ones that worked all day in the hot sun. Now, all of us know that feeling when somebody gets promoted over us, or they're making more than us and they started after us, and they don't work maybe as hard as us, and we can get naturally resentful for that this person isn't pulling their weight, but somehow they're rising and getting more than we do, and we take that very resentfully when that happens. And I had an experience when I was doing mission work in El Salvador that changed my view of today's gospel. There was, on a particular day in our village, there was a little 3-year-old boy that was just running around playing in the street, and then he just dropped dead of heart failure. His just little heart gave out, and he died. And I remember I was just so upset about that he was only 3 years old and, just really was just beginning his life. And if he was living in a first world country, he would have had access to proper health care. Maybe the doctors could have diagnosed he had a heart problem. They might have been able to have done something for him. But now here he is at 3 years old. His little life is ended. On the very same day, Mother Teresa, now we call Saint Teresa of Calcutta, died on that same day. Someone who had arguably worked harder than anyone else in recent history, all her life serving the Lord in the vineyard and in a very, very poor place in Calcutta. She's originally from Albania. She had to learn a different language. She suffered greatly physically and spiritually. She founded a religious order and many other places. She visited world dignitaries and had the courage to even scold those here in America about their stance about abortion. And she was at her funeral, over 1 million people came out. And many of them were not even Christian, but they realized there was a saint in their midst. 2 people come before God the same day. A little 3-year-old boy who really only was in the Lord's vineyard for an hour. But in that hour, he brought joy to his mother's face. He loved her and gave her a hug and a kiss as best he could, but he didn't know the catechism. He didn't know God. Maybe he could make the sign of the cross, and yes, he was baptized, but he hadn't done anything yet. And I can't imagine that Mother Teresa would have stood before the throne of God saying, "What's he doing here? I mean, I worked for you so much, and then on this day, I'm coming into heaven, and what has he done here?" That's why she's not a DOT employee. No offense to anyone that works for DOT. I loved my time there, but that's how we are as human beings. We look at what someone else has done, and we neglect God's infinite mercy. He intends the salvation of all. And when someone is called home at an early age, at the age of 3 or 12 or 20, or in Father Ty's case, 58, we can easily get angry with God. That's not fair. That person should have lived so much longer. But maybe God in his wisdom knew at 3 years of age or 12 or 20 that this person has sufficient faith and they have done enough to come into my kingdom. And maybe God knew that if they lived to be 85 years old, they might be jaded. They might reject God. Even Mother Teresa was struggling with her faith. I think I've shared this with you before. The late Bishop Curlin, the former bishop of Charlotte, was a very close friend of Mother Teresa. And one day in front of the Blessed Sacrament, She was sitting there praying and praying, and then she felt very agitated, and she just wrote a little note and gave it to him and said, "Father, pray for me." And then he carried that note in his breviary for the rest of his life. He opened it up, and it said, "Where is Jesus?" It was so easy for her to see Jesus in the person suffering in the street, but she struggled like we did. How can God allow such horrible things to happen? The rich get rich and the poor keep dying, where people physically walk over them and have nothing to do with them. And so even in her 80s, she would struggle with her faith, but never doubting God's love and mercy. And so when God calls somebody home, maybe before their time, it is because he is the generous landowner. He is the creator of that person. We are stewards of the children that God has entrusted to us. We are stewards of the friends he has given us. And we're also stewards of the priests that he has given us. And so instead of getting angry at God or saying this is unfair, we need to have the attitude that Mother Teresa would have had. I'll bet she leaned down and embraced that little child and loved him and will continue to love him for all of eternity until that little boy's mother and father and siblings and friends and neighbors will come to the same harvest. And so the gospel today reminds us that God created us to be with him forever in heaven. But what is the one thing that the people that got called at 6 in the morning, 9, 12, 3, and 5 all had in common? At the last hour, they were working in the vineyard of the Lord. It's never too late. That's why St. Dismas is a good one to go to. If we have a sibling or a friend or someone that claims to be an atheist or an agnostic, and we just pray for them, at the very last moment of their life, at least they will reach out and accept that pierced hand that extends to them. St. Dismas came to his senses, rebuked the other thief that was ridiculing Jesus, and just said, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus says, "Today, I assure you, you will be with me in paradise." In the last 10 minutes of his life, he stole heaven. And his words are recorded in Scripture. And so when we go to Luke's gospel, where we will hear of St. Dismas and how he defended our Lord, when we go and read the gospels for 15 minutes a day, if we have a problem with forgiveness, then we need to go and listen to the Lord who forgave others as he was being crucified. And so it seems on a state employee level so unfair to pay somebody the same wage that only worked 1 hour as opposed to someone that labored hard for 10 or 12 hours. But God wants us to do our part and to, at the last minute, be working for him. And so it's also a good time for us to pray for the conversion of sinners, but also for the many people that have left the church. As Matthew Kelly said, millions of people have rejected Christianity, have rejected the Catholic Church, and have no idea what they have rejected, what they have walked away from. And so when he says that perhaps we as Christians have been inoculated against the Gospels, we know just a little bit enough to get by, but now that prevents us. We become immune to wanting to hunger for God's word. Remember, Jesus himself quoted Deuteronomy when he was tempted by the devil, saying, "Man doesn't live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." And so we will survive without prayer, but we will never thrive